working with during those peace deals as well in Pakistan.
That has been the difficulty all along. I've really enjoyed your commentary, Colonel. Thanks for joining us this morning. Colonel Wayne Sanders there of Bloomberg Intelligence. Who are they negotiating with, and who's in charge? And are they the same? Colonel Wayne Sanders there of Bloomberg Intelligence. Who are they negotiating with in person? That's been the difficult part of all of this all along.
Well, Iran definitely has consensus building in terms of their Supreme National Security Council, and obviously the Ayatollah reigns supreme. The IRGC is in charge, and the IRGC is the one that is definitely in charge of Strait of Hormuz, and we're seeing that right now out in the open when it comes to these gunboats and these vessels. Who the United States is talking to are political actors, and they don't always see eye to eye.
Here's the take from Macquarie this morning. This from Vikas Trivedi. He writes the following: there are steps towards market normalization from day zero of traffic restarting through the Strait. However, we do not yet know when day zero is. Vikas joins us now for more. Vikas, good morning. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Let's just start with physical realities. We can see these shortages starting to bite in Asia. You can see it starting to work through the airline industry. Lufthansa cancelling 20,000 flights. United Airlines cutting the outlook. What are the physical realities that you're tracking at the moment?
We're tracking exactly that. So we started with the petrochemical sector, right? So the loss of naphtha and some of the feedstocks for that sector started to hit immediately. Jet fuel followed shortly after. Jet fuel got a lot more attention because most people don't interact with naphtha daily, but so it's following, and a very concentrated hit in Asia, and now it's sort of transitioning to Europe, both on the petchem and jet fuel. It will move to diesel and gas oil in a little while, meaning in a few more weeks. We're going to start seeing announcements of problems with securing diesel supply, and that's the backbone of the world's economy for transport, for moving goods around. So, that is still coming.
There's been a lot of talk about a disconnect. People often throw that word around, a disconnect between the physical market and the paper market. And many people made the case that we'd see convergence, but we'd see the paper market move towards the physical market. The opposite kind of happened in the last week. What explains that?
Yeah, it's more of a set of shock absorbers, right, that are not working. So you think about something happens in oil, it's an impulse function, right? And you get a hit, and then all these things have to happen to absorb the shock. Futures would go up, the differentials between the futures and the paper, like in the physical, would move a little bit. But what's actually happened is the physical has just done its own thing, and the futures have not followed. And so the differential between them was never contemplated to be this wide. So in some sense, it's broken, right? And it may need to be reconfigured after this. One of the challenges is Brent is not deliverable. So if you hold Brent futures to expiry, unlike a lot of contracts, you don't get the barrels. So you have to mechanistically do it other ways, right, to force that convergence, but it's not happening. And it's been long enough now. I think this next Brent expiration, if we don't start seeing that convergence, then we may be in a position where no matter what type of news flow happens, Iran gets their hands on vessels, or the US blockade holds, traffic through Hormuz is still limited. Physically, on the ground, on the water, the situation keeps getting worse, and the futures may not respond. We may still be talking about $98, $100 Brent, even though the situation on the ground is getting noticeably worse and hitting the real economy. When it hits diesel, when it started hitting naphtha, and you can't make petchems, started hitting the real economy, but there's a lag there. When it hits diesel and gas oil, and then you can't move general goods around, that's when we will all kind of know it, feel it.
The U.S. really thinks that more economic pain potentially could be the reasoning for the Iranians to show up at the negotiating table. And yesterday, Treasury Secretary said in a matter of days, Karg Island storage will be full and the fragile Iranian oil wells will be shut in. Do you think we're days away from that?
Yeah, it's getting close, but we disagree that it will significantly damage Iran's position.
Negotiating position.
Yeah, because even though oil is a big part of their economy, it ranges from 10 to 20% of their GDP. So it's a very large economy without oil. Now, it is the substantial source of funding for the IRGC. In that regard, it's absolutely correct. But will it buckle the economy and create a lot more pain for the general Iranian public? The answer, we think, is no. Or that would take a lot longer.
You also say there's a series of steps that need to happen once the strait actually does open, but we're not, you just can't decide when's going to be the first day that happens.
That's right.
But what are the first steps that would happen?
The very first step is we'll assume Hormuz is open, right? And you can get financing, you can get insurance, and people can move through it. If you start with that, you got to move all the laden vessels, the full vessels that are just hanging out there, out. And then you've got to bring unladen or empty vessels back in. So third step is you need to start regrowing production. And they've managed it very smartly. The storage tanks in the Middle East are pretty far from being full. So there is logistical flexibility. You need some space in your tanks if you're going to restart production, right? That oil's got to go somewhere before it goes to tankers. So, those are some of the big steps.
It is going to take a long time to unpack so much of this, even after the crisis is well and truly over. Vikas, appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Vikas Trivedi there of Macquarie. Let's give you an update on news worldwide. A busy morning already with the latest. Here's Yahara Arnott. Hey, Yahara.
Hi, John. The International Maritime Organization says it's working on a plan to evacuate crews from ships that have been stuck in the Persian Gulf since the Iran-U.S. war began. The organization says it can only implement the plan after clear signs of de-escalation. Russia is set to increase oil flows after restoring crude exports from its main western ports, following weeks of disruption caused by Ukrainian drone strikes. Operations resuming at all three ports, with most berths back in service.